Welcome back to LimQ Plus, everyone. On this channel, I'm 100%ing Breath of the Wild by a bit every day until Tears of the Kingdom, the sequel, comes out, which is today in 125 days. We got another nice, even number today, and the game is yet again a little bit closer. Now today, I want to talk about something that I've recently been thinking of a lot, because while I have been on a little bit of a break, I've been playing some Elden Ring again. I recently recommended Elden Ring to other potential Zelda fans in a video that I made on this channel where I kind of talked about games you can play while waiting for Tears of the Kingdom. I really loved Elden Ring, I speedran it, I have over 500 hours, now close to 600 hours in it, and I enjoyed it again. Now, Elden Ring is a From Software game, and a lot of these games are always known to be quite difficult. For Elden Ring, however, even though people already disagreed with this in the first place, because of how open it is and how much you can basically make sure that you're really strong when you fight these bosses, making them easier than usual. Now, after playing it again, I have to agree with this even more. I think that game... Also, there was a weird moment, right? Like, there was just... First of all, I've never seen these Taluses spawn here, and then they like lit up this flame, this flower, and then when I bombed them away, the flower like burned down, but didn't burn down before. Weird. Anyway, sorry, that distracted me. Now I agree even more. I think the game is definitely only as hard as you want it to be. Like, I did a lot of preparation for this playthrough, getting like really strong weapons early, and now the boss fights are essentially like... Most of the time, they die very quickly, and I'm like, damn, I wish I wouldn't be that strong. It's almost too easy, which makes sense because I've played the game a lot. And again, you can make the game as hard as you want it to be. If you play through the game at level 1, it's incredibly difficult. The entire point I'm making, or what I want to talk about today, is I want to talk about the hard content in Breath of the Wild, why it is hard, and my wishes for Tears of the Kingdom a little bit, because I do obviously want the game to have some difficult content. I talked about this in the past, but that's more on that at the end. So I wanted to quickly recap what I think is the hardest content in Breath of the Wild, why, and basically just go over that. So the first thing that comes to mind for me are two specific, well, technically a couple specific challenges related to Master Mode. Now, if you heard me talk about Master Mode before, and if you somehow don't know what it is, it's a mode that gets added in the DLC of the game, where enemies can now regenerate health, and they can scale up higher so they can deal a little bit more damage. That's pretty much Master Mode. I and many viewers of this channel, I feel like, have agreed that the mode is not very well balanced, so I'm not gonna take it into the highest consideration. But these will still be points for me, because what I'm about to tell you is, I think, the hardest content that you can play in the game, especially with the Master Mode enabled. Master Mode, it seems like it's not properly playtested because of these moments. So, what am I talking about? First of all, the Trial of the Sword beginning trials in general. Which, the Trial of the Sword, if you go back to Korok Forest and you put your Master Sword back in, you go to this Master Sword challenge where all of your items get removed and you have to beat enemies. It's already kind of difficult in the normal difficulty, but in Master Mode it gets much harder. But the problem is, in Master Mode, the beginning trials, the first of the 3 levels, is by far the hardest, and it feels unfair at times. Now, specifically, floor 10 of the Trial of the Sword in the beginning trials is a nightmare. I talked about this before in the video where I said things that were not properly playtested. It's a floor where you have to basically beat 2 Silver Lizalfos on this camp, and you basically don't even have enough durability to take them down unless you learn a specific sneak strike combo cheese, which it feels like it's way too hard, it's out of place, and not properly playtested. Another thing that comes to mind for the hardest content casually, especially in Master Mode, is the refight of Waterblight Ganon in the DLC. You get, in the refights, after you've completed DLC shrines in the area, you gain access to the Divine Beast again and get to refight the boss of the Divine Beast, the Blight. The refight for Waterblight is already difficult because the equipment that you get is quite bad. You get the Zora's Domain, like the ceremonial spear, and you get a silver bow, which has awful range. Is pretty hard to use. You don't get many arrows, and the fight is very difficult. And now at Master Mode, where Waterblight Ganon is gonna heal if you don't consistently damage it, it's a nightmare. Definitely up there for some of the hardest content. in the game. The same is true for Calamity Ganon and especially the Monk boss fight, the two big boss fights that this game has to offer. They are both very difficult in Master Mode. You need to be extremely careful or have extremely overpowered weapons, and they just don't seem very play-tested, which is why I wanted to give that notice. Yes, that content is hard, but it seems like it's hard for bad reasons. Like, it's not hard in terms of, like, reaction time and stuff like that. And that's where my next point comes into play. We're gonna move on from Master Mode now, because it's obviously meant to be harder, and talk about things that are hard in this game but shouldn't be. And one that comes up to me, and I made a video on my main channel about a mini-game speedrun. One that comes to mind for me though is absolutely the horse parkour minigame. This is at the Highlands stable. I'm gonna show it briefly to you on the map. Down here, and you have to basically ride around this lake. There's some hurdles, and specifically here the game is placing a hurdle that's awfully janky. Like, you're gonna try to jump over it, and sometimes your horse just says no, sometimes your horse just dodges it. It's absolutely awful. It's extremely hard for no reason other than that this mini game is janky. I still wanted to include it though, because I personally hated it. Now, some things that I briefly want to mention that are hard and fun in the base game, obviously Lionel fights. Lionel fights, I think, are a similar thing where they're as hard as you want them to be. If you use bow and arrow and you constantly headshot them to basically make them fall to the ground, they can be trivialized, but if you try to basically dodge every attack or parry them, they can be challenging fights. Probably the hardest the hardest fights in the base game, I would say. Literally. Probably harder than something like Ganon. Maybe the Monk, especially phase 2, is slightly harder, but Lionel fights are obviously up there. And can even give skilled players a run for their money sometimes, even though they can be abused and cheesed very easily. I did want to mention though. Now, the next 2 points are going to be some personal points from me that I think are very difficult, but this is because I personally do not enjoy stealth gameplay. I know a lot of people like stealth gameplay, right? The one stealth game that I really want to try is Hitman 3. It looks really fun because they give you so many options on what you want to do. But for example, like the games like The Last of Us, I would usually choose the loud option because I get too impatient trying to be stealthy, which is why I absolutely hate it. And for me, they were really difficult, like to the extent where I wanted to quit the game. The shrine up here. Dark Chokar, where you have to follow Oki, the little Korok. I actually haven't done it in this playthrough. Through the entire forest until the shrine eventually surfaces. And it's so frustrating to get caught. I remember streaming this casually and I literally was so upset. And then the same is true for the Yiga hideout. I just did not enjoy doing this challenge casually. I got caught way too much. I was very bad at the game back then. I hadn't played a Nintendo game in an awfully long time. I was basically a League of Legends only player. And which is probably difficult on its own. That's already kind of challenging to do. But yeah, the Yiga hideout was not something I enjoyed. Now, that's pretty much the first things that come to mind for me. There's specific shrine puzzles to a lot of people. This shrine here, Kioruk in the Korok Forest, with a tricky star constellation puzzle is probably considered to be one of the hardest parts. I personally really enjoyed that. But I'm interested in your opinion as well. What was really difficult about this game, or in this game for you personally? Because maybe something that I haven't even thought of as hard, actually I do want to mention one more thing, looking over there, was very difficult for you, before I move on what I want difficulty to look like in Tears of the Kingdom. The letter quest, that is somewhere down here, where you have to basically make sure that this love letter from the Zora girl, which is a weird quest in general, gets to this guy who's like sitting down there somewhere, like behind this rock. It's very tedious, very annoying. It's mostly not difficult. It's mostly just annoying. And again, it requires a bunch of patience in playing really safe, and it's anxiety-inducing because you know you have to do everything again when you mess up. And content like that, I don't like it. I guess it's hard. It's hard to say it's difficult per se. It's just that I don't like it, and it makes it difficult for me to play. It's not necessarily mechanically difficult. But speaking of mechanical difficult content, again, let me know what was hard in this game for you, and if I have mentioned already, maybe you agree with me, maybe you disagree, maybe you have completely different points. One thing that I want to see in Tears of the Kingdom is not difficulty modes or whatever. I honestly feel like, especially in these open world games, difficulty modes are completely out of place just because of how much you get to decide the difficulty yourself, right? Like, you can prepare a bunch of arrows and weapons before you fight Calamity Ganon and make the fight super easy. Or you go in there with only the Master Sword and 3 hearts and you dodge everything and you parry everything and suddenly it's hard. Like, that's why I feel like difficulty modes are not needed for open world games like this. But I think offering additional challenges in the late game to really prove players' skill and allow players to basically push the game to its true limits is amazing. I think Hollow Knight has shown this with the inclusion of the Pantheons, which is essentially just a giant boss rush. That extremely challenging, optional quote-unquote post-game content can be super rewarding for a community because they get to like absolutely go crazy and optimize that content as much as possible. I think they try. I don't know if their intention about the Kilton medals was that, but I'm struggling to imagine that they thought the Hinox and Molduga boss fights were so hard that only like true completionists go after these medals after their playthrough, because in case you don't know, you cannot get the Kilton medals until you have completed you cannot get the Kilton medals until you have completed Ganon. You have to beat Ganon before you can get them. If you don't know what Kilton medals are, somehow these are these medals. They will get added to the star tab at the end. And you need to defeat the 40 Moldugas, 4 Moldugas, 40 Hinoxes, and 40 Taluses to get them individually. But in the case with the DLC, they tried it as well. They tried the sword, right? I already touched on this, but it's nowhere near as convenient and to do as the Pantheons. If you don't know what I'm talking about, again, and Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania game with tons of different bosses, and they add this area in the DLC, which is free for them, where you get to not only just by doing a simple click, basically fight against another boss again, you get to, from the game, add restrictions. So it's not just like imagine there would be this like room in the Shrine of Resurrection where you can refight all bosses in Breath of the Wild, but you get to click options like only 3 hearts, only specific weapons, your weapons do less damage, you die to a single hit. Like, I feel like that's not that hard to do in terms of coding, but can add a bunch of fun for people and longevity for the game to potentially Tears of the Kingdom. I would love to see something like that in either the base game or in potential DLC if that does ever happen. And let me know as well if you agree on that as well. I think the Pantheons in Hollow Knight were a perfect showcase on how to do something like that and still keep it optional. Well, technically there's some endings in Hollow Knight that are locked behind the completion of those. But, oh, I also did not mean to do that, by the way. I wanted to block the explosion with the shield, but I forgot that I didn't have a shield equipped. But yeah, anyway, that was my brief rant about what I think is kind of difficult in this game and what I think about difficulty in open world games in general, with my recent rediscovery of Elden Ring and realizing how quote-unquote easy the game can be if you really take advantage of how much freedom the game gives you and how you can explore in any order. Again, I'm really interested in your thoughts. I'd like to see if some people struggled with different sections in the game. Actually, another good one, just towards the end here, that I want to mention real quick. I actually, for no reason, had really big issues with this golf challenge down here. I think I'm, as a player, just like pretty impatient. So instead of playing it super safe, what I would do here is I would try to like, yeah, make it with as little shots as possible. I know this is optional content in the game, but I'm just not good at stuff like that. But I'm sure other people have other strengths and weaknesses, so let me know in the comments. I will see you guys again tomorrow for another video. Direct, I'm assuming, is going to be announced within the next like 30-ish days now, maybe 40-ish days, so that's exciting. I will obviously talk about that more in the future, but for now, I see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Peace.